Hello, how's it going?
Hello, it's good. How are you? How's your day?
Good. It was it was a little bit chaotic, I guess.
Oh no.
I mean, I felt like, at the beginning of the week, I looked at my to-do list at work and I was like a little bit overwhelmed because I just felt like I had all these giant projects, but they went so smooth. I got them all done. I felt like my day was trucking along. I'm ahead of schedule. I sit down to eat lunch because I work at home. I sit down to eat lunch. I let Gunner outside. Gunner's our dog. He's a 2-year-old black lab. And he just has we have like one of those invisible fences, but his collar has been like on the fritz lately. So he has been going on these little adventures like to our neighbor's house, which is like
Oh,
normally he doesn't go more than like 20 or 30 feet from like our house, not because he doesn't
yeah.
have more room, but because he's just like, he keeps like a solid 60-foot perimeter from like the line where his collar would like beep him and send him back.
Right.
So he's been like going on these little adventures. So I let him out. I'm eating lunch. And then I like hop on this meeting. And in the middle of the meeting, I'm like, where's Gunner? I think I forgot him outside. And he was gone. Like I walked around, and obviously like being on an acreage, there's a little bit of ground to cover. And so I like called and I walked around and I waited a couple minutes, and it was clear that he wasn't just being like a ding dong hiding somewhere else and just
Right.
like ignoring the like call to come home. Um, so he took himself on a little adventure. He was gone for like 45 minutes while I
Oh.
canvassed the neighborhood calling for him. And then I returned home and he's just like sitting on the front porch waiting to be let in. Like,
Like nothing happened.
why aren't you here to let me in? Where were you? But he went like a few houses down, and he went down into their like creek and um like into their woods,
Oh no.
and he came home
I was gonna
super
say,
sweet,
was he
like,
smelly?
yeah, like shit smell. And
Ooh.
so he then earned himself a bath, which he's not
Oh,
very. So that was kind of the pits because it was very cold out to walk
yeah.
around and look for him. And it started to get to the point where I was panicking a little that I'm gonna
I
have to tell my
know.
kids I lost our dog. But the peaches for the day, I met with my mindset coach, Melissa Bloom, and I've been meeting with her for like a year. And she's just like the most calming, calming, grounding, joyful force in life. And I just love meeting with her. It's
Mm-hmm.
and then breaking news, my peaches coming into this, I just heard that Fallout Boy is releasing a new album this summer. And
What?
I am so excited. We not only do we get a new Matchbox 20 album, we get a new
Right.
Fallout Boy. I mean, it's been like years since either of them have released music. And so I feel like this summer has a lot of potential for like good music
Good
releases. So
music.
I'm pumped about that.
Yeah, I'm super pumped about the Matchbox 20 concert this summer.
I mean, we've only been waiting for 3 years.
Right, right.
So,
I know.
I am also very excited. Have you seen them live before?
No, I haven't.
Oh my gosh. I've seen them one other time at Stir Concert Cove. It wasn't actually that long ago. It was like within the past like 5 years, probably 5, 6
Hmm.
years. Um, and Stir Cove, is outdoor.
Right.
But the night that they were performing, there was like awful storms. So they just moved everybody into the like indoor arena that's right next to
Oh,
Stir Cove.
fun.
And because Stir Cove obviously like doesn't have assigned seats, like you didn't have assigned seats going into the concert arena. And so I was like fifth row ground floor, like
Oh
just
my
standing
gosh.
like within arm's reach of like Rob
Right.
Thomas. And it was the most amazing. I mean, at one point, Eric wasn't there with me anymore. Like my coworkers weren't, I was just
You're
by
just
myself and I didn't
living
even
your
care.
best
It was
life.
amazing. They're so great. I'm so pumped.
Oh, I know. I'm so excited. Yeah, my peaches, well, I'll start with my pits. So my pits were, I mean, I slept literally all day. So like my pits kind of wraps into my peaches because my peach is I just took a me day today and
Right.
I hadn't been feeling well the last couple of days. I could tell my body just needed like a solid reset. And so I got a full night's sleep last night after we were done recording. I went to bed, got like a normal like 7, 8 hours of sleep. I got up, I helped get the kids out the door. And then I went back to bed and I slept until 2:30 this
Oh
afternoon.
my God.
Yeah,
So clearly you like really
I
needed a
so
reset.
needed the reset.
Mm,
And so I don't know if it was, yeah, I don't know what it was. So like
yeah.
my pits is like literally nothing got accomplished today, like work personally, like I didn't even wake up to use the restroom once. Like, so, but it was obviously very needed. So it's like kind
Yeah,
of
I don't know that you
two.
could call being unproductive your pits because I think that like clearly you needed a full day, like
Yeah.
a full day of rest.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I think you deserve a pat on the back for taking it and doing it. Good job, you.
Thank you. But yeah,
Does
and then
Mavis
this
snuggle with
evening,
you?
what?
Does Mavis snuggle with you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, she's
Yeah.
like the best snuggler ever. And so she's generally at my feet when we sleep
Hmm.
overnight and then also during the day because she has no kids here to play with and
Right. Gotta
Jesse's
get her
working.
snuggled somewhere.
So yeah, it was great.
Oh, that sounds delightful. That sounds
So
delightful. All
I
right.
wanted I wanted to remind you of the story for Spitfire Shenanigans.
Ooh, one of my favorites.
I know. Okay. So Caroline and Nora, like we've said before, have a whole lot of personality in these two tiny little bodies. Um, and we had them over at our house playing one time. They had a sleepover, so in the morning they were obviously like not on their A game, but they were, I mean, they were
They're
hanging in.
holding it together.
Yeah.
The train was still
Uh,
mostly on the tracks.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. So this was shortly before lunchtime, I think. At this point, it was very clear that they were just full out fighting. Nora was on the stairs, crying, and Caroline was in the
So,
living room, but not crying, just pouting.
right.
Um, and I walk in and I'm like, "Hey, girls, what's up?" And Nora goes, "I'm sad. Caroline made me sad because I want to play Barbies and she doesn't." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So Caroline, being in the living room, is overhearing this conversation and yells, "Well, you're making me sad too." No crying, no nothing. And so I'm like, okay, girls, like, you only have about an hour left. So let's like maybe get together. And one of them, I can't remember who, said, let's just not be sad. And it was like, okay, done. Switch
Okay.
flipped. They were back to playing and doing
Let's
their
just not
their
be sad.
thing. But I love that they just decided in that moment, like, all right, together we are not going to be sad. And that is how all problems should be solved.
We're together and we're just not. We're just not.
We're not doing it. We're not doing it. But yeah,
Gosh.
it's
If only they could make that decision, when they're like losing their shit over folding the laundry. They could be
oh,
like, let's just not be upset about this.
yeah, yeah, it does not work when I'm like, hey, let's just not be sad, or let's just not be a jerk, or let's just not be frustrated. It doesn't work that
Oh,
way, unfortunately, when they
right.
respond to us. But yeah, so tell me about Eric and his partner praise.
Well, I will say, so I called him like it ties into my pets because I called him after like 20 minutes when it was like very clear that Gunnar was not home. And he did leave a meeting to come home, which I then like canceled. And he was like en route. And I was like, never mind. He came home. We're fine. Um,
But he smells like a
and
butthole.
yeah. And so Yes. So I was like, and he was like, "Are you sure you're not upset?" I'm like, "I'm not upset. I'm just flipping annoyed that I like had to walk all over the neighborhood looking for my dog who like very clearly knows he's not supposed to leave." Um, and then he called me back, and I forget why he called me back. And he is like, "Well, what are you doing right now?" And I said, "Well, Gunner rolled in some shit smelling mud. So I'm going to take him up to Pets Earth and
Mm-hmm.
they have those like self-wash stations." I was like, "I'm going to go, I need to go wash him." So he was like, "I will come home." And I was like, "No, I feel bad. It's not a lot. It's just like a little patch of mud, but
Right.
it just
But
makes you want to vomit because it
yeah.
smells so bad." And he was like, "No, I'm coming home." He goes, "I can't really it's not very often I can just like leave and come and help. So like, let me do this." So he came home and um took Gunner and washed him and made him smell much more delightful than the way
Yeah. Well,
how
that's
he
awesome.
arrived home.
So he smelled like flowers when he arrived.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
What about you, Jen?
My, yeah, so Jess, this week, because I haven't been feeling good, he has been just planned all of our meals all week long. I have put 100% zero effort into feeding anyone this week other
Mhm.
than myself occasionally. And he just like even without like checking in, being like, "Hey, like, do you want me to do this?" Or like
Right,
he's just
right.
been doing it. And it's been so nice to just like have that completely out of my brain
Yeah.
and not worrying about it, especially since I wasn't feeling good.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome. I
way to
love
go.
those.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Uh,
What are we talking about tonight?
Today we are talking about the programming between genders, how we were raised, um, and how we were raised to be women and raised to be men, and what that looks like between the two sexes, and how it affects the mental load. So, all of this really just says that from an early age, that women's worth and our value comes from the house we keep and the kids we raise.
Yeah.
And boys and dads are taught that their job is as soon as they provide shelter and money for their family, then they're good to go. It's
Mhm.
And so these gender norms are now hurting millennial moms because while that may have looked okay 40 years ago and
Yeah.
it made a little bit more sense from an economic standpoint, now so many of us are working outside the home.
Right.
And so we're now what? Now, so what do
Yeah.
we do?
What
So
does it
what
look like? What does it look like at your house because I have like a very clear, like I see this perfectly in kind of the way like our day-to-day life plays out. And I'm
Mhm.
curious like what it looks like from your guys's household perspective.
So I have made this is something that I was always very conscious of. And I think it's because I grew up with divorced parents. And so I saw my mom, who had custody of us most of the time, literally doing everything, always
Mhm.
by herself
Mhm.
because she didn't have anybody else. And so going into my marriage, this was something that like I was aware of and I didn't want it to be a thing. Not realizing it's actually still a thing because it's so indoctrinated into
Mhm.
us as just humans.
Yeah.
Um, so I would say that the division of our household is split up less with gender and more with preference, but it still falls along the gender
Yeah.
lines pretty clearly. Um, Food is like meal preparations is, I would say, pretty dang close to 50-50. But it does take lots of conversation. But we both are really great about going to get groceries. We're both really great about making the decisions for meals. As far as who's doing the cooking, it actually falls on Jesse a lot because of the fact that he works from home and I commute. And so it just makes sense for him to
Right,
start
right. Because you
supper
can get it
before
started and yeah.
right. And so I would say that the meals feeding food is pretty split, but other than that, it's very like the physically demanding chores
Mm-hmm.
are
The handy
mostly his.
things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
mostly his, and the other stuff is mine.
Yeah.
What about your guys' house?
Yeah. I mean, I think ours is probably pretty similar. I mean, I feel like looking back and thinking back on my childhood growing up, like my dad did all the grocery shopping and he did a lot of the cooking. Um, but I think that's kind of where it stopped in
Right.
terms of like, like things that maybe were not so like this is stuff that women do and this is stuff that men do. And I think it is like I would say our house is very much the same. Like there are some things like the meals that we split and we like share responsibility for, but then like kind of like indoor stuff. So
Yeah.
anything that belongs inside the house,
Right.
including the things that live in it, tend to fall like tend to fall to me. And then like the outside stuff
hmm
tends to fall to Eric. I have like offered to, because we have like an acre and a half. And so I have offered to help mow. But he really enjoys yard work and like doesn't want to share that. And that's okay. The one time I like mowed one little spot of our yard, because he didn't get it to finish it. He was sort of like home for like a day in between work trips and he just didn't get
hmm
to it for some reason. And I was like, oh, it's like on the straight part of our yard. I can do this. And we have this 0-turn mower. And long story short, it basically looked like a drunk person mowed our lawn. And all because the 0-turn mower is like so twitchy. So it
You try.
is. I did try. And I mean, it did get done. It just wasn't in straight lines.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
But I do feel that like there is sort of this like second shift feel to what moms do. And
Yes.
then, but there is like this clear, like dad comes home, kicks his shoes off, and he's like, all right, I'm going to take 20 minutes to like go scroll through my phone and like sit in bed.
hmm
And that is not like the same life that I tend to lead on a daily basis.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I would agree with that. So going back to like what we were taught, so women generally are taught that like we were saying, our self-worth comes from the house we keep and the kids we raised. And that we're taught to be caregivers. Therefore, when we go to prioritize our day, caregiving ranks higher
Yeah.
because we've been taught that giving care is how we are judged and where our value lies. Um, and so some other things, I really like this. So when we were looking through the topics and whatnot and how generally speaking boys and girls were raised, this nice versus kind concept,
Yes.
which I've always like I've never been able to like really articulate it because it's a conversation I have a lot with my girls.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly because my boy is 3 and is just a honey badger all the time.
Right.
So it's just because it's not like an age conversation yet. But like what is nice and what is kind. And so being nice is when you're polite to people and treat people well. Where being kind is when you care about people and show them that you care. So
Mm,
you can be nice without being like they aren't interchangeable things. And we're
right.
taught as women from a young age to be nice.
Yeah.
And nice means we're avoiding confrontation and we're just
Mhm.
making sure that everybody
We don't
is
rock the boat.
yeah, gonna rock the boat, everybody's comfortable, where really humans should be kind regardless of their gender, which is more about caring for people and showing them that you care, but can also occasionally feel uncomfortable if you are rocking the boat, if you're saying, hey, like, I need
You're
you to
giving,
do this and not this
yeah.
because I care about you and those types of things. And so I love that I was able to dig in deeper with that nice versus kind,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
just space.
There's
Confrontation. Go
there's
ahead.
this concept. So I like this, nice be versus kind, or not verse, but like the difference between being nice
Yes.
and being kind, because nice just leads, I feel like, made me like a doormat, right? Like
Right.
I think naturally I have a people pleasing kind of tendency and personality to begin
Hmm.
with. And like you compound that with the expectation, and like it just, like there's so many, like my internal dialogue is drastically different than like what people hear on the
Yes.
outside, and um I always joke that like Nora is sort of like my inside voice on the outside, because because she doesn't, like, she is not a doormat, and
Yeah.
she speaks her mind, and she like speaks her truth, and just like is very comfortable being in it. I see a little bit of it changing in now that she's in school. And so I can
Hmm.
see where, like, I really do try to encourage her to like hold on to that,
Hmm.
even if it's sometimes damaging to me psychologically.
But it's going to benefit her in the long
It is
run.
going to benefit her in the long run. So I roll with it. But the kind thing, it reminds me of this concept that I read. Sheryl Sandberg is not necessarily like somebody that I follow super closely, but I think this is like a concept. I know I've heard her talk about it. Gary Vee has like a spin on it as well. Mm, So I think Sheryl Sandberg calls hers radical candid, being radically candid, and Gary Vee is kind candor. But essentially, like, the premise is the same, where it's like, I am honest with you, and I know that you can handle it because you know that I care about you. So, like,
Yes.
on a day to day basis, I demonstrate how much I care about you. And so, like, you are secure in that idea. And so then when it comes time to give you like uncomfortable feedback, or to speak up for myself, or put a boundary in place, or, give you like constructive criticism, it's like you don't need to take it personally, because you know it's just coming from a place of, and I don't need to worry about that. Like,
Right.
I don't need to try to regulate your reaction to it. I can also be like secure in the fact that, like, that I know we care, like we all care here.
Right. Right. No, I love that.
So I think it's something that I like started using when I was like a young manager. And I feel like I feel like, it kind of slips over into like your personal life too.
Oh,
Like a really
absolutely. Yeah, I would say that I was far more doormatty in my 20s than I was in my 30s, or than I am in my 30s. Um, and I think that's just kind of something that you learn along the way. And if you have those people in your lives that can really like feed that seed early on, is going to be like best case scenario. Because nobody,
Side note question
yeah,
on like this. So I do feel like I have grown into my own a little bit as well in my 30s. However, it doesn't ever show up with my family. Like, I am still as I'm still like the peacekeeper, and I am still the like,
Mm-hmm.
it's just not, I don't know that it's ever going to change. And I don't know, maybe it's because my family is like so strongly opinionated, and um like their East Coast roots sort of sometimes make them lack tact, where I'm like, it's just easier not to say anything. Or if, because like I've got friendships where like I, you know, put stuff in place all the time and I don't feel bad about it.
Right.
But mm, family
Huh.
dynamic. Mm-mm.
I would say that I probably wear softer gloves when dealing with my family. Um, but me and my siblings and my mom in particular, like, aren't really afraid to say, like, I can't do that. You're asking too much of me. And
Mm.
like we have this understanding of like that's allowed and nobody's gonna get their panties in a knot over it.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure I could say the same about moving from like my nuclear family to other family members if
Mm.
I could say the same thing. Because I probably am. No, I do use softer gloves when I'm speaking to like my in-laws or family that I'm not as close to.
Right.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
I'll
No,
have to do some self-reflecting on that.
no, I would say that like I 100%, even as like a 35-year-old woman with 3 children, like nothing makes me feel like my 17-year-old self more than just like being stuck in like a family, like an uncomfortable family dynamic where you're just like, oh God, make this stop.
That is so funny. Yeah, I think it really just has to like it has more with like what you're willing to give, put up with type. I think it's all like really like
Mm,
personally defined.
yeah. It's never, I think not a lot of it is bad. Like,
Right.
there's stuff where you're just like, sometimes you're like, that's just like too much, but
Hmm.
it's like so hard to like put that boundary in place. But then I think also like, I think a lot of the women in my family sort of also have like the same
The same.
disposition,
Right.
like we are all trying, like you can hear it in our conversations, like when
Yeah.
we're coordinating like holiday things or something, like everybody is trying to make sure that everyone else like feels okay,
Hmm.
and so then you never really know, like, I think we've like kind of sort of gotten better at being like, oh, that just really doesn't like work for me and my family. Like my mom used to, I don't know if it's like an East Coast thing or like where this comes from. I've always found it so bizarre. But like we'd be like, okay, well, family lunch on Sundays. And she'd be like, great, we'll eat at 2. And I'm like, what? 2? That's like not lunch or dinner. Like, but we went along with it for like years because we were just like, okay, well, like, if that's what works for you. And then
Uh-huh.
like I think, I don't know if it was like it was like in recent history, in modern history, within the past year or 2, like she threw something out and finally I was just like, yeah, that doesn't work for us. I was like, I'm not, we can't eat at 2. I said we need to eat between 12 and 1. 1 being the absolute latest because I have 3 young children who eat 4 breakfasts just to make it the 3 hours in between breakfast and lunch, like,
Right, right.
so asking them to finish breakfast by even 11 a.m. and then asking them to wait until 2, or, that's a little, okay, 10 a.m. and then
10.
asking them to
Right.
wait until 2. I'm like, it's in the middle of nap time for the
Yes, I was
youngest.
gonna say nap time for the youngest for sure.
And also I was like, and just for me personally, like, what the fuck am I gonna do with 2 o'clock? Like I was like, I can't eat lunch. So by the time I get to you, like, and we drive an hour
Right.
to get to family lunch. And so we all show up hangry, which is not anybody's best look.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then also, like, I've eaten my full meal from like 2 to 3. And so then at 8 o'clock, I'm like, I should eat this whole pizza because I
Yes.
am fucking starving.
Because I'm starving.
Because I ate, because like I basically combined my lunch and my dinner at this so it's so funny because like I finally was just like, yeah, that's not gonna work. I think I might have just been like in a shitty mood that day. I mean, I didn't say it like that. And of course my mom was like, oh yeah, why didn't I think of that? Like
Right.
it was totally not like
It was a non-issue.
it was a non-issue. It had only been an issue in my head,
Right.
and then my cousin also like chimed in and was like, oh yeah, it really doesn't work for us either. But like we'd all just been going along with it because we want to be nice.
Yes.
When like really the kind thing would have been
The better play.
to just say like, hey, lunch between 12 and 12:30 works best for our family.
Yeah. Yeah. We have diabetics on our side. So like family lunches are noon because otherwise the diabetics start to lose their minds. And so
nobody needs that. Nobody needs that.
Yeah. So nobody messes around with the diabetic.
I think what it must have come from is like when her and her siblings like grew up going like her family was Catholic, and so they grew up going to like Sunday morning mass, and then there was and it was from like small, like they're all Italian, and like the town they grew up in is a lot of like Italian immigrant descendant families, and so they would like there was, I think just it was a longer like church day. And so then I think, and she said before that like, everybody, once they got done like cleaning up the church hall and doing all the stuff and the things after the like church deal, then they would go back and like start cooking another meal at my grandma's house. And then everybody would sort of like come throughout the day. And so I think it just that's probably like where it came from. And like, again, like nobody thought to just be like, that doesn't actually like work for our current situation. Could change that?
It's because we're programmed to put others' needs before our own. Right. That's how we're like, and so here we are in a circle of women, in your case, all trying to be nice and all putting your needs above the others. And it turns out that 2 o'clock was actually the worst of the times. Everybody else was feeling the same thing, but nobody was willing to say it because we've been programmed to be nice. And that kind of leads into like our tone of voice. Like we want to make sure that we are not ruffling any feathers and that we're sweet and we make suggestions and we don't demand. Because if we ask for something, then we're seen as aggressive. And this is even worse for women of color who are labeled as the angry Black woman if she speaks her mind. And so, I mean, the whole nice thing is, it goes into so many different directions. And so then one of the other things that women are also taught with kind of that caregiver piece is that our time and our work is less valuable than what men can contribute. And this is seen both at home and in the office, where the housework isn't nearly as important as the man going and drawing his designs in an architecture firm, because that provides money. Like it has it's a very transactional process where the behind the scenes work, it's not nearly tangible. It's not a direct exchange of product and payment.
Well, it's like we're the essential workers of
the pandemic
households. Like, you think about during COVID, how many of us were like, you know what, we take for granted, like all these people who come and work at the grocery stores and our gas stations. And, my cousin works for his city, like waste department. And he's like, where would we have been if like the waste department had stopped
Okay.
coming around and like collecting our trash and like,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
we let, you know, we as a society tend to look down on like trade jobs as,
Mhm.
you know, less skilled or whatever. And um, then but all of a sudden, like when something like COVID happens, you recognize like, oh, our world doesn't keep turning if these
Without
things
these
don't
people.
happen. Like,
Yeah.
and those don't happen without these people. These are critical people.
Yes.
And so it's almost like, you know, when we value women's work inside the home, we're like the essential workers. Like if we don't plan the meals or if we don't have a backup in case you forget to plan the meal,
Right.
no
Because it's
one's
the
eating dinner.
turns out nobody's going to eat. We're going to spend more money on McDonald's Happy Meals.
Right. If I don't set my alarm to wake everyone up,
Right.
no one's fucking
Nobody
going to
gets
school or
up.
work on time.
Nope. Nope. And so it's, I mean, it's just all of that like background stuff that isn't like, isn't this tangible,
Yeah.
giftable little package. Um, and so one of the things, when I was prepping for the episode, was this excerpt from an article that said women are often seen as multitaskers as part of their personality. However, if being a multitasker was a personality trait, we would see it spread across everyone, both genders. But as it stands, women are the ones that are being assigned this label. So I was just like, it was one of those like moments where I was like,
Yeah.
duh, like
Yeah.
it makes so
We're
much
we're
sense.
multitaskers because we have to be, not
Right,
because it's like our personality.
right, right. Which I
I
just
think there's
thought,
actual scientific evidence that says like you shouldn't multitask because you just do a worse job at both of them
yeah,
than if you
no, there
focus
absolutely
on
is.
one thing at a time.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, like our
the
brain can't actually multitask. It can
mhm.
jump very, very quickly, but like our brains can't actually do two tasks
Right.
at the
It's
same
like
time.
that meme where it says like I started like, you know, cleaning the kitchen and then I jumped to the laundry and then I went to this and this and this
Oh,
and
yeah.
now here I am looking at my high school photos.
Yep, yep.
It's
Yeah.
like, yes,
Or you do that
that
for
is
3 hours and everything's only a quarter cleaned.
right.
Because I mean, that's like literally how I clean, which I need that for my own like brain space. Like I have to jump around, otherwise I'll get bored. But I think, yeah, multitasking is not a personality trait. It's not
You
something
heard it
that
here.
you heard it here. And
It's not a
we
personality
we are credible people. So then let's jump to men. So men are programmed that their worth is providing for their families. And once all of those jobs are complete, then they deserve to be cared for and taken care
trait.
of. And so they're taught from an early age that they should be the breadwinner and that they should be the protector of their family, um, and that their jobs are more highly valued than women's jobs, and that um, emotions are weak. And so that results in men who can't articulate emotions and they can't figure out now they're stuck in this place where they're adults and they have to navigate emotions, but they've been told to like stuff them down deep down.
Down.
And so it's this completely unfair place for them to be because
Mhm.
they're completely disconnected because they don't know how to feel because they were taught that you shouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like we've had this conversation many times and I don't know why. Like I have like one of the nights when the girls were doing hip hop last year, like stuck in my head. I can still like visualize where we were like sitting
Fitting
in the lobby.
studio.
And it's sort of like as like for our generation in particular, for women, we have sort of like our eyes have been opened and we kind of see this like sort of next phase of caretaking, right? Where we're like focusing on treating our children with like emotional IQ and helping them learn emotional
Mm-hmm.
needs and like expression and all of that stuff. And I think we look at our kids a lot differently than like our parents. And I'm sure this happens with every generation, right? Like,
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know, but we are kind of in this generation where we want our boys to learn and understand their emotions. And
Mm-hmm.
then like we're stuck with like our husbands who are kind of like straddling through no fault of their own, straddling this like line where, you know, they were taught to bury their feelings, but now they're married
Mm-hmm.
to women who are like, please tell me your emotions.
Let's
And
do some digging, big guy.
you know, let your kids have them and embrace their emotions. And they're like, you know, it's got to be exhausting
Oh,
to on
absolutely.
their end to feel the like to feel that tension because I
Yeah.
mean well, I don't know, in our household it ends up feeling like tension,
Yeah.
you know, because we're sort of like dragging them along like come on,
Right.
like why can't you get past this, but it's so difficult to unlearn like a lifetime of lessons.
Right. Absolutely. And because we're the ones that have opened our eyes, so to speak, and we're trying to teach all of this emotionalness to our children and how to regulate themselves and identify emotions. And they have one parent who is doing this and doing it well because we were allowed to have all of our emotions and
Yeah.
identify them and talk about them. And then they have a dad who is trying, but not terribly good at it. And
Mhm.
so he then defaults back to mom. And
Mhm. Mhm.
it's okay, well, whatever you say about the kids is right. Like I
Yeah.
wasn't taught to do this, so like you're right.
Mhm.
Always.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think that's a really like unfortunate position to be in, you know, like it's and I know this kind like I know this extends out. I mean, you see it play out even like in kind like in our court system, even when there are times when like the father provides like the more stable household,
Hmm.
our society still defaults to the mother. Even, you know, like, and it's an uphill battle for in
Hmm.
those instances for those men to be like, no, this is I don't know. She's not the best option for this child, but
Right.
that like as a society, and you know, and you see that like trickle down into then like, you know, on a much less severe scale or a much less I don't want to say important. That's not the word that I'm looking for. But on a less serious level, you see it come into, you know, when like you were saying, you know, that like our husbands will be like, well, I mean, yeah, you probably know what they're like feeling or
Right. Right.
ever more. So I guess I'll just defer to you.
Yep.
And that creates an a tricky dynamic to navigate. Because then too, on our side of things, I know it's difficult for me to let go of that rightness, you know? So,
Right.
like, when I see when I see, like, Eric and Hudson starting to, like you can see the water starting to boil, and you can tell that, like, this is gonna escalate into, like, an argument of some kind. It's hard to and it's something that causes a lot of tension, and I have to, like, actively work on, like, not
Interfering.
always interfering and not always being like, I can very clearly, even if I can clearly see what's going on from the outside, I
Right.
have to actively like work on um how to, like how
how to best be that role without
yes,
being the
how
leader.
to kind of like step in. It's a very like it is probably one of the things that like when we argue, this is one of the things that we argue at. And like I am very much aware of it, but you see it happening and like you just again, because we've been programmed that this is like where our value comes from is like these kids and how they turn out. And so then like I think you feel like so incredibly invested that
Absolutely.
it,
Yeah.
can end up causing
It's
tension between
well, and it's a lose-lose then situation because
right,
it's not allowing our husbands to make mistakes and learn from them.
right.
But we also don't want our children to be hurt by something that their fathers just don't know. But then we
Mhm.
also don't want to hurt our partners because we're jumping in and saying, no, no, you guys are doing this all wrong. Knock it off.
Mhm.
And so it's just like this vicious, like we need to somehow just like completely cut away all of those naturally pulled strings and figure out a
Mhm.
way to do it as effectively as possible, knowing that there's going to be trips and bumps along the way.
Mhm. 100%.
So a group looked at um, a group of researchers looked at these young men for that was like our like younger early 20s.
Yeah.
um and they all were like, yeah, we support gender equality, like that, like
Mhm.
duh, that makes sense. but
Yep.
they but they still had these like traditional ideas about gender roles and
Mhm.
continued to explain that men are the breadwinners and protectors and that women are the caregivers, and felt that societal attitudes really haven't changed much. So it's like everybody recognizes this problem, but they're like, we don't really know how to fix it. So we're just going to keep on keeping on.
Okay. We
And
still got to
so,
keep moving, people. So,
right. And so breaking this down into different little pieces to tackle the bigger problem is one of
Mhm.
the ways that we reinforce the gendered behavior, is by focusing on economics. If one partner earns more money than the other, we tell ourselves that the partner who earns less or works fewer hours has more time for household work. Sure, that makes sense in theory.
Yeah.
However, that's not what's actually happening. Each week, mothers are still spending nearly twice as long as fathers doing unpaid domestic work.
Yeah.
And so it's like everybody sees the elephant in the room, but nobody wants to move it. They're just
Mhm.
living. They're just
We're all
living
just
with,
living with an elephant.
yeah, and it's exhausting. And so they're just the men and boys are just, they're not taught to look at the things that we look at as women,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
the mental load is largely anticipating and monitoring all of those outcomes. Hi, Jack. And it's all this shit end of the process
Yeah.
to do. And that's how gender program contributes to the mental load is, I mean, we still have all of these things that we've been programmed to do. And so it's just, again, that reinforcing wheel of not being able to figure it out. Are you okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I get distracted. My, my cat was chewing my hair and I was trying to listen, but
No,
trying
you're
to
good. I
quietly
saw
listen
Jack
is
making his cameo.
good. Yeah, I 100% see how this plays out, right? Like at the end of the day, we still just kind of model what we end up knowing. And
Right.
I'm curious like how and it might be too early since Warren is really only like 3 coming up on 3.5-ish, but I often wonder in our house if like Hudson is responsible for probably like a lot of chores that would be considered more feminine things that would
Mm-hmm.
normally have been assigned, like he has to empty and load the dishwasher. He has to help take care of the cats. Nora, we are still working up to one whole chore of feeding 3 animals and not losing our shit. So sometimes, unfortunately, because Hudson has a much calmer demeanor, he ends up doing a little bit more, and like we'll be like, you need to go help Willa get dressed. You need,
Mm-hmm.
so some of those more like caretaking things where we'll be like, it's your job to get her like in and out of the car and get her like buckled into her car seat and stuff like that. But at the same time, there is like so much, it's so interesting because I still think that like they tend to model like what they see.
See.
And, so like Willa, for example, is this like delightful little shadow who looks around and notices that there are dirty plates sitting in the living room. And so without being asked, at 3, she will pick them up and take them to the kitchen and then come back and say, Mama, I put the plates away. Whereas like Hudson, who's 9, has just been like eating cereal and dropping it on the living room floor and crushing it into the couch. And then he gets up and
Right.
like throws his trash on the floor and just like, totally just
Mm-hmm.
because I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say that's what they see happening.
That's
Like
Eric does. He
Eric
eats
doesn't just like sit in
cereal
his
and
chair and like let food fall all over the floor while he watches TV, but like he'll eat watching TV and he'll just like set his plate on the end table next
right,
to, and then like it doesn't necessarily make it to the sink, right?
right.
Like, but I would walk by and I will see it and I'll be like, oh, I'm just gonna, I'm already on my way to the kitchen. I'll just take this to the sink
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
thing. And so I will be curious, like once Warren is like old enough to really like
Mm-hmm.
mix years, because sometimes I look at it and I go, is it like an oldest child to a youngest child kind of thing? Is
Mm-hmm.
it, like a gender thing? I'm just how much of
No,
it is nature
absolutely.
versus how much of it is nurture.
Right. No, I totally see what you're saying. And with my oldest 3 being all girls, I definitely see like the traditional birth order
Mm,
personality traits are really strong at our house. So
yeah.
like Charlotte is very responsible and she does a great job of cleaning up after herself. She is responsible, like she doesn't need reminders in the morning of what needs to be accomplished from wake up to leaving for school.
Right.
Like her stuff's just done. Where Fiona, the second child, is only 18 months younger than her, has been going to school only a year, like grade wise, they're
Right.
only grade apart.
Yeah.
But Fiona, we still need to be like, did you get your water bottle? Did you pack your lunch? Did you brush your teeth? Did you? And we need to go through all the things. And so it
Mhm.
will be interesting as Warren gets older, and then when Willa and Nora get older, with my oldest being a girl and your oldest being a boy, and
Yeah.
seeing what trickles down with us having very like similar
Yeah.
feelings on gender norms
Yeah.
and who's responsible for what. Um, but yeah, right now Warren's just a honey badger, like I said. He's
Right.
just he's he's just an animal. He does there are certain tasks that he will do and listen to. We have a non-negotiable of like cleaning up after supper, like you are responsible for your plate, utensils, and cup. And so he is really great about taking his stuff up to the sink. He has a really hard time between paper and plastic plates though.
Mm.
So that's really confusing. So sometimes we'll find paper
Sure.
plates in the sink and plastic plates in the trash.
I mean, that's fair.
But yeah, but we'll give them some
Yeah.
grace there.
Yeah. Yeah, it will be interesting because also I feel like ours, so it's funny because I don't feel like the birth order personality traits are as strong in ours. I definitely see like some of it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I would say like Willa is like probably like the most agreeable and like easy flowing out of all of them. Like
Mm-hmm.
she's totally happy to like help out. She like, but on the flip side, it's interesting. I feel like they kind of have like this mix because she also does understand that she is the baby and people tend to think she's very, very cute. And she
Yes.
plays that card often. Like it has been a sore subject as of late with the older two that like she always gets her way. And the reason is because she's two. And like that has gotten old.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see just like how it plays out because I think like you said we're both very like we try to be very conscientious of
Yes.
not being so like this is what a man takes care of, so this is what a boy learns to take care of, and
Right.
vice versa. So I'm curious to see like
Yeah.
where
Keep
where it
listening
goes.
to us in 3 years and we'll circle back
We'll
and
circle
we'll
back. We'll
update.
let you know how
I'll
it's
let you
turned
know how
out.
that goes. But yeah, so another piece. Oh, go ahead.
No, you're good.
Oh, okay.
I'm listening.
Listening. Yeah. So another piece that I found interesting was that women say that they're solely charged with handling their child's well-being and being attentive to their emotions and relationships. And that evidence supports leads to lower satisfaction with their partner in their life, as well
Mhm.
as feelings of being emptiness. And I kind of go back to that like sponge analogy we used in a previous episode
Yeah.
where we are just wringing our emotional support out. And then, so then that leaves us like actually empty and with less emotional bandwidth, you can't connect to another human in
Yeah.
an emotional way. So it just makes sense that that would lead.
Mhm.
Um, and this was still it was included whether that woman felt unconditionally loved and accepted, as well as how they viewed intimacy with their partners. So
Yeah.
even with taking all of those variables into account, this researcher found that being solely responsible for child's emotional development was negative related to the woman's well-being and satisfaction with their relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
So should we say that again for the men listening?
A little
That
bit louder.
being responsible for a child's emotional development was
Mhm.
negatively related to the woman's well-being and the satisfaction with their relationship. So having a
Yeah.
partner in cultivating that em- emotionally intelligent child get
Yeah.
leaves us with bandwidth to emotionally connect with our partners.
Yeah. Yeah. I also think too, this is interesting because we have had this conversation in various forms of our relationship. And one of the things, like, because Eric will be like, I miss like having time with you. Like, cause there's, most nights I'm just like, oh my God, like
Yeah.
I have been like talked at for the past 5 hours straight since I picked the kids up from school and they went to bed. And like somebody always wanted to like sit on my lap or hug, like, and it's all
Yeah.
like this, like I want to soak all of that in. But then I get to bed and I'm like, please stay. I don't want to hold your hand and watch TV. I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
please
Yeah.
get your kneecap off of my side of the bed.
The
And we've talked about it just in context because his like love language is touch. So he's like, half
Mhm.
the time I'm not even here for sex. I'm just like, here, I just
Right.
want you to love me too. And I'm like, here ya, touched out. Like I
Yeah.
don't, you know, and but we've also talked about it in terms of attraction because, and it's been hard to explain that like over time, and especially like as we add more kids on, like the attraction changes, right? Like when
Right.
I met my husband and we started dating, like he had a six pack and like was in ROTC, and like I was just like, you look good and I like your personality. So, and like we have fun together, and that's like all it
Yeah.
took to be like attracted to him, right? Like
Right.
he treated me really well and he was really respectful. It was like, I was attracted to him because of the way that he treated and acted toward me.
Towards you. Right.
And now that we have three children, it's hard to explain sometimes, and it's been hard to like for him to kind of like wrap his head around. I'm like, our day, like my attraction to you now also, like the level of it on any given day also is like very strongly tied to how you're interacting with the kids.
Yes.
So like if you are like a grizzly bear that day and like just sort of like cantankerous to deal with, and like you're kind of on the kids about their about like consequential shit, and like or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, like if you guys spend all evening bickering or arguing or yelling at each other because you're just, one of you is having a bad day and the other like can't absorb that emotion, then like when the kids go to bed, I'm like, I'm good. I'd like some
Yeah.
alone time. Like I like I'm not thinking about being intimate with you. I'm not thinking about like
Mm-hmm.
you. I'm just like, oh,
Right.
good,
It just,
and like it's hard to explain that like over time my attraction has changed, or the way that I'm attracted has changed, because I think largely for him, like it's been the inverse, right? Like
yeah.
he's still like, hey, like you look hot, and
Right.
I'm like, I've seen you like go through childbirth, and that was really impressive, and now I like love you even more. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And
Absolutely.
I'm like, it's just, we're like, going different ways on the road here,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's hard sometimes to like bring
Yeah.
that together.
The attraction is it's like almost more complicated
It is.
now
It is. That's what
because
I've said.
like we
It's so
just
much
keep
more complicated.
like the attraction that I feel and the ways to get me to be attracted to you,
Mhm.
there's more layers to that
Yeah,
onion.
100%.
But like
100%.
so today was
Sorry,
like
I
a
trapped you with my scallions, but now I'm like a full-grown onion, and and I'm gonna need you to peel back those layers.
and yeah. You're gonna have to find it. But today was a perfect example because I took a me day. And so I had very little interaction with any humans other than me and my pillow. And so tonight, after we got the kids to bed, I sat down on the couch with Jess. Normally, I would just jump right into podcast prep, but I sat there on the couch and he had his arm around me and we just sat there talking. And I was like, I miss you.
Yeah.
Because I had the bandwidth in that
Right.
moment to like
Yeah.
feel that feel of like
Yeah.
being physically close with my husband and feeling like we haven't been able to here for whatever reason in the last week or two because we've been
Yeah.
busy, and I wasn't feeling well. And so it's just like, it's like exhibit A. Like,
Mhm.
you see,
Yeah.
like when I took care of myself, it
Right.
turns out I want to work on us too.
Yeah.
And I want to
Yeah.
be with us.
Yeah. We have this conversation too, because um Eric will say, like, I need to be close to you and I want to like touch you and I want to love on you and things like that. Because when things are chaotic, like, I need that to feel connected to you.
Yes.
And I go, yeah, see, I don't want to do any of, like, I don't like think about being like physically close to you, because I need to feel connected before I go, oh, I'm going to sit down on the couch and like snuggle up with you,
Yes.
or like, um so it's just such an interest, and again, like it's that's so much different than like when we first got married. You know, when we
Absolutely.
first got married and all
Yeah.
we had was a diabetic cat to take care of, you know, there was so much more time for activities.
Yeah,
And now I'm just
absolutely.
like, sometimes it feels like we're just like ships passing in the night.
Uh-huh.
And that doesn't, you know, it leaves me feeling indifferent. It's not good
Right.
or bad. It's just the way life is. And then like I have to actively think about like being different.
Absolutely. So, something else that the article I read mentioned was that stereotypical expectations about what constitutes men and women's work um, isn't simply like an outmodeled relic of past generations. It even persists among LGBTQ families as well as millennial families. So like this
Yeah.
isn't, it's clear that this is like just like so indoctrinated in us as humans. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter who we love, essentially.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm excited. So we have an episode. It's not kind of in this initial run of like the first 12, but I'm excited because we do have an episode planned after that to specifically like go through and do like a real deep dive into LGBTQ plus couples and relationships, because
mhm.
I think it's interesting that it still falls like on, you know, kind of into like gendered roles to some degree. But also I will be fascinated because I think like there's so much more fluidity in terms of like gender on a spectrum. I
Right.
like am so curious to see how that plays out and like, you know, how it affects and kind of changes, or if it affects and changes
Right.
the
Right.
mental load significantly. So that is coming. That is something that we want to do. I just wanted to slip
Yeah.
that in. We're not glossing over it because because we don't have much to say about it. We have so much to say about it. We're doing a separate episode. So
Yeah, absolutely. So, Caitlin,
yeah.
do we just not give a fuck anymore? Do we just care less?
Do we just care less? That is a question. No, the answer is no. So
Right.
this came up, this particular topic, because my husband sent me a reel, and it was like as Angie and I were sort of like in the thick of planning out the content for this podcast, and it came across with like no context, which I mean, to be fair, like every reel he sends me comes across with no context. But most, like, you know, all of them generally, like it's very obvious what the context is as soon as you read it
Right.
or watch it. But this one like came across with no like, hey, either like this would be good for your podcast content, or hey, you should think about it like this. So essentially what this reel was is this lady who was like, I forget what the like title text of the video was, but she starts to explain that very similarly to what we're talking about here today, which is like women were taught to care about their house and their kids, and that's where their value comes from. When men were taught that their value comes from being breadwinners and protectors, providers and protectors. And she was like, so women, like, you should stop telling your dad, or stop telling your
Your
dad.
dad.
God, where have we gone wrong? You should stop telling your husbands or trying to convince your husbands that they will be happier if they clean the crumbs off the counter, because they won't be. That's not what they were taught to value. That's what you value. She was like, you should instead convince them that you will be happier when the crumbs are cleaned up, and therefore they will be happier. And she was like, men will do a lot of stupid shit to make women happy. And so like you're tracking up to that point, right? You're like,
Right.
okay, I get it. But then she ends by saying, also, women, you should just care less. And I remember I like immediately forwarded it to you and I was
Yeah.
like, I don't even know what. What? I was
Yeah.
like, something about this is not sitting with me right. And you were like, well, wait a second. Why should we be expected to be okay with working full time outside the home and caring? Like, why should we be expected to care about it all? And they are told that we should care less. Like, why don't they just care more?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Like,
No,
why should
I,
we be happy? Why should we be happy lowering our standards? Why shouldn't they be happier raising their standards and
right.
going, you're right. I don't think our counters should have crumbs on them every morning from the
Mhm.
night before.
Yeah. It just like it's one of those things where like, okay, like generations and generations of women have settled for
Mhm.
less. And so
Yeah.
like maybe we're the generation that doesn't have to. And so like instead of us settling, why don't like we just meet our partners well like our care meters. If our care meter for the house is a foot long and their care meter for the house is half a foot long, like why don't we just both care 75%
Right.
or
Yeah.
somewhere
Somewhere
between,
in there.
like
Somewhere in
literally
between. A
somewhere
good old fashioned
anywhere.
compromise.
Yeah, like an actual compromise. And so like yes, probably we shouldn't hold our value and worth as women in the tidiness of our household or
Yeah.
the cleanliness of our children, but like also like a cleaner, tidier home and clean, tidy children just make things work better.
Yeah.
If the counter's covered in crumbs, then we can't effectively cook a meal without cleaning them first. So like
Yeah.
let's just work together. And so that they like the clean surface is ready. It's like that anticipation of the mental load process. We're anticipating, having to use this kitchen again in a matter of hours. And so we should probably make sure it's ready for us.
Right. Yeah, to me, it was just like it just didn't sit well because I was like, this is the problem. Being like,
Right.
women just care less. Like, what?
Like,
What?
why?
Like, would I like would you say to me if I was, I don't know, like studying to get my master's degree and I was like struggling, would you be like, well, just care less about how good you do on that assignment? Or like care less about getting your degree? Like, what? Wait,
No.
I would never just like actively tell somebody to care less about
Right.
something.
Right.
Unless, like unless it was bad for them,
Right.
like if my husband was like in like some sort of toxic friendship, then I might be like, I
Like,
really, I can't visualize that at all. But if for some reason he is inhabited by aliens and becomes part of a toxic friendship, then I'd be like, I
right.
think you should care less about this person or
Right.
this friendship.
But like it's not we don't need to be discouraging people always. Like
Right. Like it's so bizarre to me. You would never just tell someone to care less. So like it answers the second question on our little content brief here. Should men care
yeah,
more?
yeah,
Yeah, you
they
should.
should.
You should care more.
Right.
Because but here, like, okay, why should you care more? In my opinion, I think it is for yes, it is for the health of your relationship. Like, you're not gonna I'm not gonna get super excited and you're not like I'm not gonna feel like it's revolutionary if you get the kids to bed by yourself on time one time.
Right.
Like, good for you, you caught them on a good night.
Right.
Like,
Right.
they don't do that shit every day, but why should you care to do more is because I think there's so much at stake for it. Like going
Yes.
back to the top of the episode, it is a better relationship with your partner in the household. You're creating bandwidth for your spouse to feel better toward you or to feel anything towards you because the bandwidth hasn't been soaked up by somebody else. And it also allows you to connect more with your kids. Like
Mhm.
for as frustrating as it is for me to feel like I am the sole keeper of all the stuff and things in my household, in a lot of those mundane tasks is also where I connect with my kids the most. It's where I learn the most about them. Like,
Absolutely.
is getting out the door to school on time every day, does it seem to surprise everyone every morning, even though we do it every fucking day? Yes. However, on the ride to school, I hear I get asked so many random questions that I'm like, "Oh, I didn't even know you were thinking about that. I didn't
Right.
really," or somebody will have something to say, like it's where the car ride home is where I've learned about bullies on the playground. It's where I've learned
Mhm.
about crushes, like all of those things
Yeah.
I learned in like the mundane day-to-day operation things,
Right.
like putting the kids to bed inevitably because children believe that bedtime is the best time to suddenly open up and have thoughts
Yeah.
and about their day and to share them with you. Not
Yes.
when you ask them at the dinner table,
Right.
when you've got plenty of time to discuss. It is a stall tactic to get out of going to bed.
But it
Super
benefits
frustrating.
us to some
Super
degree.
frustrating. But it does benefit you because that's the time of day when like Hudson is the most vulnerable and the most open. He'll talk about like how he's really feeling about something or if something is bothering him. Whereas like I will ask him multiple times throughout the evening. Like I'll ask him when I pick him up and I try not to just say like, how was your day? I try to ask like, was there anything good? Was there anything interesting?
Mhm.
Anything bother you today? And like most of the time, unless he's like genuinely like very upset about something, 9 times out of 10, he's going to say like everything was fine. And he's going to
Right.
have like breadcrumb thoughts about it if I'm
Yes.
lucky. But the second I laid down to like read a book with him and like snuggle with him a little bit before he falls asleep, that's when like it all comes tumbling out and like
Absolutely.
he opens up about everything. So that's the stuff that's at stake for men. Like so I don't think we should care less. Like I think there's a lot of value and a lot for you to gain men by caring more.
Absolutely. I think those mundane tasks, especially when you're able to be one-on-one with our family having 4 kids, it is difficult to get that like one-on-one time with a kid. And so doing those mundane tasks of driving them to soccer practice or laying down and tucking them into bed, like it is a time for them to just be them and you. And I
Yeah.
think that that is just such there it's these beautiful moments
Yeah.
that people could potentially be missing out on because they're not caring enough. But
Yeah.
I don't think that they realize that that's what it's at stake.
Yeah, I don't think so. I had this conversation with one of Eric's aunts at Thanksgiving, and like her and her husband are both just like recently retired within the past couple of years. All three of their children are like grown adults. They've got several grandchildren, like and I was telling her kind of about this project that we were working on. And I I didn't know what to expect. I kind of like just sort of expected from like anybody older than us, really, like
Right.
the generation before us, like our mothers, our aunts. I sort of expected like oh, that's cool.
Right.
But instead, like, I was shocked when she was like, oh, like, yeah, 100%. Yes, this was an issue with us too. And that was one of the things that she said. She goes, I regretted not asking, or quite frankly, she's like, just telling him that he needed to be involved more, because she was like, he didn't, when by the time the kids were older, he didn't know them as people,
Right.
because he didn't have those moments with them where they opened up, or he saw, or overheard the chit chat between friends
Mm-hmm.
as he was carting them to the birthday party or
Right.
whatever, and she was like, I wish that I she was like, I wish I would have known that's what the outcome would have been, because I would have made
Pushed
him
harder.
change. Yeah, I would have pushed
Right.
hard.
Yeah, that's super interesting to speak to the generation above us.
Yeah.
Makes me
Well,
want to
I
ask
mean,
some.
because this has been around I think this has been around forever. I think it's just
Yeah.
the cracks are finally kind of starting to show, and we're a little bit fed up.
Yeah. We're feistier. We're
We're a
done
little bit
being
fed up.
nice.
Yeah.
No, just
Yeah.
kidding.
Awesome. Okay. So I think that's it for today. If you have enjoyed our chat, please subscribe, like, share, rate, review us. It really does help other podcasters. Sorry, let me start that over when my cat's not about to knock my microphone over. Now our past beat his cat's feeding, so he's about to
Bring that.
take shit into his own hands.
Yeah.
His own paws, I should say. Thank you for listening to today's conversation. If you have enjoyed it, if you think this message is worth sharing, please help rate, review, or subscribe to the podcast. It helps other listeners like you find us and helps give us the feedback we need to understand how to make the show better and keep improving it to make this everything that you need from us. So we'll catch you soon.
Catch you later.
Bye.
Bye.